Tonight's top story is agenda setting and gatekeeping in the media. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm your host tonight, Brandon Swanson. I'm able to stand up here and talk to you about this topic because I have done a great amount of research and have put together a deliverable in the second semester based off of that research. I've also completed numerous courses in the communication field, such as mediated message production with Professor K, comm responsibilities with Dr. Mello, and perspectives on human communication with Dr. R, and that's just to name a few. I've also put in countless hours over at WXAV, the radio station here on campus. Tonight's agenda: agenda setting theory and gatekeeping. Define it and give an example. The role of the reporter in relaying news messages to the public, and then how that impacts the public. The documentary, the process, and everything that went into making it, and then finally, wrapping it up. First on the agenda tonight, agenda setting theory. Agenda setting theory, as defined by McCombs and Shaw, states that the salience of objects and attributes can be transferred from the news media to the public, or in metaphoric terms, the media agenda sets the public agenda. That's how they define it. Also, Wu and Coleman weigh in, and they define it as the phenomenon of the mass media selecting certain issues and portraying them frequently and prominently, which leads people to perceive those issues as more important than others. And also, McCombs, Shaw, and Weaver looked at two different parts of agenda setting theory. And they state that on the first level, in the first part, agenda setting deals with the selection of issues by the news media and its impact on the public agenda. So ultimately, the news stories that reporters decide to report on. The second level deals with the influence of the particular elements of an issue on the public's agenda of attributes. So ultimately, the second part looks at how the public is influenced by the story that the reporter selects. Now, moving over to gatekeeping, very similar to the agenda setting theory. Gatekeeping, as defined by Shoemaker and Voss, states that it's the process of culling and crafting countless bits of information into the limited number of messages that reach people each and every day. And it's the center of the media's role in modern public life. Both of these play a big role in what is selected to portray to the public, and then how it is portrayed to the public. Pingree, Quinetta, Chernev, and Dickinson talk about gatekeeping trust and how the public trust news workers to do the cognitive task of finding the news and then truthfully reporting on it, so they, the public, does not have to do it themselves. As Americans, sometimes we take things for granted. And one of those things that we can take for granted is the news that is reported to us each and every day. Is it really the truth? Do we know? Have we checked our facts? Are we educated enough to know that sometimes we need to check the facts? That is an interesting point to bring up. Now, stemming from agenda setting theory and gatekeeping, and an example out of this is the coverage of the Iraq War. A Factiva study done by Muddiman shows some interesting findings. Shows that on cable news networks, the study took the top two shows on the cable news networks, CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. And right up there you can see Bill O'Reilly. The O'Reilly Factor was one of those taken. Anderson Cooper 360 was another, and Rachel Maddow, the Rachel Maddow Show, was another one taken as well. And what they did, they looked at this and they saw how people watched these shows and then what people thought about the war in Iraq. And they came to find that Democrats were not in favor of the war in Iraq, while on the flip side, Republicans did support it. Republicans definitely supported it when they only watched Fox News. However, if people watched Fox News and CNN, their support for it went down. When they just watched Fox News, it was very high. When you bring CNN into the mix, not as much. It goes to show that people on these stations are having an impact differently than on other stations. And that's interesting. This leads to the role that the reporter has in reporting the news. Reporter power is something that I saw as we, the public, giving them the power because, again, going back to, are we checking our facts? Do we really know? The reporter has this power to be able to report and will believe it, whether or not it be true. Objectivity versus subjectivity. Objectivity, reporting for what a story truly is. Looking at the facts, reporting the facts. Subjectivity, reporting on stories and framing the story in the way that the reporter, the anchor, or the journalist sees it. Objectivity over subjectivity. That's how it should be done in reporting. With the way that people such as Bill O'Reilly on Fox News and Chris Matthews from MSNBC report on stories, it leads the project of excellence in journalism to call that the answer culture, offering up crusades and certainty, and putting the blur of information in order for the public. And watching Fox News, I've done it myself. I've watched MSNBC. I've watched both of these shows, The O'Reilly Factor and Hardball with Chris Matthews. They both give this certainty. This is how it is. Or that's how it's got to be. That is their opinion. That is not the news. Those are not the facts. Not everyone is going to think that very way. But they report it like it is. An absolute truth. A Pew Research Center report done in 2013, which is very interesting, stated that facts across the cable networks accounted for just 37% of the news reporting. Facts, just 37%. And the other 63%, opinion-based news stories. That just doesn't seem right if what the public wants are the facts. Just 37%. And then CNN, a cable news network that many people would look at as the middle network, the right down the center compared to Fox News and MSNBC. CNN doubled their opinion since 2007 from 30% to now what is 57%. And also it found that 52% of stories on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox held just one point of view. Not good. Reporter influence can be very strong. Sometimes, maybe not. And it varies. And Jay Levine, chief news correspondent for CBS 2 Chicago, shares his thoughts. This leads to the impact that reporting has on the viewer. And Bryant, Thompson, and Frinklia found some very interesting information going all the way back to the times of the Civil War. Historical context is very interesting, especially for this topic. Publications that were published during the time of the Civil War came out in favor of the abolitionist movement. They came out striking down slavery, talking about how it was wrong, how it was not right to treat this group of people any differently than anyone else. It changed people's views. It changed people's perspectives. It had an impact on a lot of people. Another story, John D. Rockefeller, oil tycoon, very prominent for his time. Some journalists, not a big fan of John D. Rockefeller, and they had their stories reflect that they saw him as an evil capitalist who was trying to ruin the American economy. And again, they wrote it just like that. Before long, John D. Rockefeller became one of the most hated men in the United States. So much so that he had to go out and get his own PR people. It can definitely have an impact on the public. Reporting can definitely have an impact on public opinion and how people view a certain story or even certain people. Does the impact depend on you? You in the public. It definitely can. People must be educated and they must be able to do their own fact-checking. And Carolina Cruz, WTVO eyewitness news reporter, opines. This leads into the documentary that I did here in the second semester of senior seminar. The process started back in January, which seems so long ago, probably because it was. I spent that time crafting up an email that I would send to my participants along with questions that I would ask them as well. Dealt with multiple emails back and forth with Dr. Robinson, so much so to the point where she was probably like, "Brandon, please leave me alone for just a few minutes." But she never came out and said that. And I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be perfect. The people that I had in my documentary: Jay Levine, Chief News Correspondent for CBS 2 Chicago; Carolina Cruz, WTVO Eyewitness News; Andy Gannon, 23, WIFR News Anchor; and Howard Ludwig, reporter for DNA Info. They all brought something different to the table. They all brought something unique They all brought great information. They all were a vital piece to this documentary. I asked questions such as, how does a news reporter go about choosing an organization? How does an organization go about hiring? How does objectivity and journalist reporting connect? How does it intertwine? How is it related? Issues of framing. What they thought about that. Very interesting questions. They had very interesting answers. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what does go into reporting, what does go into setting the news agenda. And it's not about opinion. It's about facts. It's about informing the public. That's what it's about. Future considerations, I want to add on to this. I want to make this even better than what it already is. And I took pride in my work. I always do, and I think it was a very good documentary. But there can be more added to it. I got a call the other day from someone I reached out to 2 months ago about doing an interview. She said yes. No longer for the purposes of grading, but for the purposes of making this even better. I'm very excited to be able to add on to this to make this better. Objectivity and integrity will always be at the heart of reporting, always has been, and always should be. And until next time, folks, keep it classy, Saint Savior.